Turn the recording on. I know she was punching her keys over there. I could tell that she was doing something.
Thank you.
No, I'm having trouble hearing you. Is anybody else?
Me?
No, we can hear you, Ann.
Everything fine.
Okay.
Turn myself up a little bit, Ann. Is that better?
That is better, actually, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for saying, Ann. Apparently everybody else was, or at least Glenn was reluctant.
We didn't want to listen to you tonight, man. That was the difference.
Yeah,
All right,
thanks,
so-
Ann. Thanks a lot.
Really.
I'm going to call this special meeting of the Kent Planning and Zoning Commission to order at 7:04. And we do have a member of the public, so I'm gonna read our call to order. This is a public meeting which will be audio and video recorded. Just like every other Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, applicants will be asked to present and answer questions pertaining to their applications, and members of the public will be allowed to speak during public hearings. To ensure sound quality, the default rule for this meeting is that everyone will remain on mute. Commissioners and staff will generally remain on mute except when speaking or voting, and will generally keep video of themselves on throughout the meeting. Applicants and members of the public should feel free to leave their video on or off. However, they will be asked to turn their video on when speaking, and when speaking, applicants and members of the public will state their names for the record. So some ground rules that we have for our meetings are to be respectful, seek first to understand, then be understood, listen carefully, don't interrupt, stay on topic, speak for yourself and not for others. It's okay to disagree, but remember that this is a discussion, not a debate. Be candid, and please avoid making assumptions, particularly about intentions, beliefs, or motives. As we said before we started before we called the meeting to order, there are 5 members, and I think that we will elevate Ann to voting status. Mostly this is a discussion regarding the changes that we're contemplating making to the regulations. We've got Glenn here, Glenn Chalder, who is going to help us navigate through some of the 6 or 7 items that we'd like to discuss over the next many months. On the agenda, and under new business, the first item is 3A, which is the initial discussion regarding the parking regulations revisions. And I think what I'd like to do, if it's okay with everybody else, is to sort of turn this over to Glenn and have him steer the conversation. I can jump in and move from agenda item to agenda item, but Glenn, if it's okay with you, I'll ask you to start talking about the agenda item 3A, the parking regulation revisions.
Yep. Thank you very much. Before I do that, let me just start off and kind of try to put everything into context here. So I think the commission is looking to make a number of regulation changes. I think probably the largest of those in terms of work effort and time is going to be the subdivision regulations. And so that kind of defines the process here overall. But what I've tried to do is sequence different activities over the course of the coming months to be as efficient as possible in terms of our time, make sure we have enough time at a meeting to kind of cover the issues, and then move on to other ones. So tonight I had a pretty good sense of what I thought the commission might be interested in terms of the parking regulations. So we'll get into that in a minute. And then later on, I think camps and resorts is something that I probably need to have a conversation or discussion with the commission on. We can talk about that tonight. And then senior housing. I anticipate that in January, I'll have drafts regulations for us to respond to the things that we talk about tonight, or any changes, for example, to the parking regulations. And at that meeting, we'll also do the kickoff on the subdivision regulations. That will lead us into February, where I think we could or should be ready for a public hearing on adoption for the first set of regulations. And I will be working on the subdivision regulations in the background for a little bit. Come March, we'd be ready to talk about possibly housing in the VR1 and VR2, and then conservation developments in the VR1 and VR2, or the subdivision regulations may be ready at that time. continue that work in April. And then in May or June, we can have public hearings on adoption. So I think this is a measured approach, if you will, to address those issues. And so I think that's what I would propose to work on moving forward. Any questions or comments on that before we get started?
Only, Glenn, that that we likely will have to wait until we see how the North Main litigation turns out before we really start talking about the conservation development and the VR1 and VR2. I
Yep.
don't think we can make any changes while.
Yeah, and I anticipated that might happen. So if that is the case, then we'll either defer it or postpone it or, kick it back a few months. So I think that those are things that we can do. But again, I think this hopefully is a measured approach to the issues at hand and carry us into the future. So everything's good there? We're good?
Good.
Okay, so next thing I'd like to do is bring up the parking regulations. Wait a second here. Did not click the right button there. Share screen. Here we go. So I think what I've attempted to do here is take the parking section of the existing regulations and started to take a look through them for changes or other things that might be relevant. I think we're updating them. The commission updated them recently for the electric vehicle charging, so that's going to be appended to this section. But what I wanted to do was to kind of roll through this section and get your thoughts and comments on things that I have started to address or other things that may be important for the commission to talk about. So in the first part of this section, there's really not much in the way of changes that have been identified unless the commission has any comments. It basically says that parking facilities are required and there's a minimum parking requirement. And that leads us in now to the parking tables, which identify, I'm just going to blow this view up so we can see it a little bit larger on the screen. Some of the parking standards. As the commission may be aware, there were some changes proposed statewide in terms of parking standards and ratios. The commission, I believe, opted out of those provisions, but I think it's possible that the commission could start to address some of these different types of unit sizes. The current regulation, for example, for multifamily dwellings is regardless of the number of bedrooms, it's 2.5 spaces per dwelling unit. Whereas the parking requirement for single family house is only 2 spaces per dwelling unit. And so there can be some differences between multifamily and single family. Often a single family home would have a driveway and there's actually, if they have, dinner guests over or friends stopping by, people can park in the driveway. Often the similar situation doesn't exist in multifamily, so we need to provide some sort of parking consideration for that. But what we're finding these days is that many of the occupants of multifamily housing are 1- and 2-person households. And so the parking requirements in an efficiency or a studio or a 1-bedroom unit can be smaller. So I've identified some possible parking changes for your consideration. As we go down the list here, for a single family detached dwelling, the current standard is 2 spaces per dwelling unit. And then later on, there are some other things that might happen in a house, such as a home-based business or a boarding house or something. And so I've added text here to say, plus any spaces is required below. And that could include an accessory dwelling unit. We might require 1.5 spaces for a studio or 1-bedroom and 2 spaces for a 2-bedroom. For multifamily dwellings, a similar type of approach, again, based on the number of bedrooms. Home-based businesses.
Glenn, before we move on there, why is affordable housing struck from that?
Affordable housing isn't necessarily a housing type by itself. It's going to exist as a studio, 1-bedroom,
I see.
2-bedroom, 3 bedrooms. So it was only that it would appear sort of discriminatory if we were to say, yeah, if you have a studio, but it's affordable housing, you have to have 2 spaces rather than 1.5. So I think
Yeah, good.
correlate it to the possible occupancy. I think on the next page, it's a little bit more interesting because right now, the way we think about parking is interesting. Your current regulations say 1 space per 200 square feet or 1 space per 400 square feet. And so when we explain parking this way, a higher parking standard requiring more spaces has a lower number of square foot per space. And so many people use the phraseology as I've introduced here, which is for retail services, perhaps our new parking ratio could be 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. Now, our current standard is actually 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet. Hopefully you're with me on this. In other words, if it's 1 per 200, that's 5 per 1,000. And so what we're finding in terms of parking numbers and parking occupancy is with the evolution of Amazon, the addition of other types of retail mixed in, et cetera, that the parking spaces or the parking requirements for businesses are not generally what they used to be. And so we have an opportunity in our business areas, and particularly in Kent Center, to provide some flexibility that not as much land area would be taken up by parking spaces. And it's possible then that that land area could be used for additional floor area, which would enhance the village, support existing businesses, allow for mixed uses and other scenarios. Back through the Urban Land Institute, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and other regulations to look at the current parking standards, making sure that we're still going to have enough parking spaces. And these are the numbers that I included here for your consideration. Some of these don't change very much. I mean, the Hotel and Country Inn, it's currently, 1.5 spaces per bedroom, suggesting, 1.25 spaces per guest room. Guest room. I'll fix that. Apologize for that. But again, you could have a hotel or a country inn that has a little suite in it or whatever. But generally speaking, it's, a family or the guests. And it's rare that we would have 100% occupancy. So these are some standards for your consideration. I think the business sections are the biggest changes in here overall. Let me just go to the next page, which is another set of standards, and then I'd like to kind of roll back and talk about the standards generally speaking. So in terms of education type uses, again, I've tried to refer to 5 spaces per 1,000 or per 1,000 square feet of GFA. But on some of these, it's very hard without having more information to know exactly what the nature of a public or private school might be, or a school operated for profit, in terms of what is their class size ratio, what age group are they addressing, et cetera. And so I just felt it was useful here to say as determined by the commission. Now, in that situation, if an application were to come in, I would suggest that the commission ask the applicant for a parking study based on the nature of the use that they're proposing, and the commission can evaluate it for reasonableness. Clearly, if it's smaller class sizes or larger situations or high peak occupancy and other things, those issues should be reflected. But I think picking a number across the board, such as here we have 1 space per 1,000 square feet of GFA with the minimum of 5 spaces, really whether that's adequate or not would really start to depend on what's the nature of this school operator for profit. For example, you could argue that a karate studio, you've got instructors, parents who want to be there with their kid and watching while they're doing the karate, and 1 space per 1,000 square feet might not be enough for that. So I think the nature of the use could come into play. I think some of these other ones are again based per 3 seats. I think the issue is perhaps related to building capacity rather than just auditoria or other things. Daycare uses have also been added in. So those are the standards that I've suggested in these areas. And I'm sorry, that it turns out there is one more page. Again, this relates to entertainment and amusement uses and also recreation uses. And I've continued, as you can see here, for example, at the bottom, as determined by the commission for certain types of uses based on the intended occupancy, et cetera. So was your thinking in terms of revisiting the parking standards mostly related to the parking ratios? Or were there other elements as part of the overall conversation that you felt were important?
Well, I have always found that the parking requirements were a little onerous, so I applaud the reduction in some of these fields, and I think those areas where, as directed by the commission, is excellent. I couldn't agree more.
I agree with that as well. You know, during the discussion, while we were opting out of the provisions of the 2021 legislative session, that it was recommended that we look at the parking regulations, and it was really about the ratios. I think for me it was more than anything else.
So I think the biggest or most common discussion with regard to parking ratios typically has to do with the sort of the retail standard. This one here about, you know, number of spaces per 1,000 square feet. You were requiring 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet. What we find very often in a mixed use village area like Kent has is that people will park once and then wander between stores, et cetera. So you don't need a parking space for that person for every store. You can get by with fewer. And in fact, the number in some communities in Connecticut where they have more residential in the vicinity or incorporated into their developments, they also provide some flexibility. So I'm very comfortable with the 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet. An experience over time may show that even that number could be even lower. But I think that this is a good step. It's a 20% reduction in the number of parking spaces across the board. And then that could result or support 20% more square footage in the Kent Village Center area. And I think that's a positive direction.
So how scalable is that, Glenn, or for you know, for us in the future? Is the 1,000 square feet scalable down to 250 square feet, or are the spaces scalable down to 1?
I mean, I think, well, if somebody had a 250 square foot building, which is pretty tiny, right? These standards would only require 1 parking space for that. And these are the minimum parking requirements. If somebody was proposing to open a small jewelry store in a 250 square foot building, I would suggest that they need 1 parking space for themselves, 1 for an employee, and at least 1 for a customer. But if we think about sort of the larger village center area with the interconnected parking lots, et cetera, that's going to work much better. I do think that they are scalable in terms of parking ratios. I have seen parking ratios set up that says, look, if the building is less than 1,000 square feet, it's this. 1,000 to 5,000 is that ratio. And then, you know, let's say above 10,000 or above 100,000, the number would drop significantly. Parking ratios are generally set up on the Black Friday model, which means that we want to make sure we have enough parking on that one day.
Right.
And that results in excess parking spaces so many other times of the year that, again, we scratch our heads sometimes and ask whether or not the ratios are appropriate. And I think we have to find a kind of a median number or value that we think works for us.
Glenn, this is Alice. Maybe I should know this, or it's very evident. How do you incorporate parking along Main Street, for example? Or That, I mean, who owns that space? How do you figure that one?
Well, even if the town had a common lot, if I was proposing, I'm just trying to think, next to the library on the right-hand side, I think there's a small wine shop or something else like that. I don't think they have a lot of parking on their property.
Right,
If somebody was proposing to come in to build that building today, we would say, hey, listen, we're looking to have 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet of GFA. And the person might say, I don't have any space to build that. I don't know that our regulations are currently bigger. Well, for that, bear with me for a moment here. Well, that's a good point, Alice.
I think there's something in here, and then I'm looking for that now too. I'm sure that there's something in here that talks about using on-street parking to offset the parking required for these uses.
I scanned quickly in a map. I didn't find it. So I think that that's my first big note from this, is that we have to enable, I guess I'll call it, the use of on-street parking spaces, or allow the commission to consider.
I think we have always considered that, but the on-street parking spaces, or specifically Route 7, that is owned by the state.
Yep.
And we can't designate those spaces to a
right.
given. So we've always understood that, you know, as if there's always some additional spots somewhere along the street. And I think that's always, if you look back in any of the applications we've ever had for any of the stores along 7, that has been a consideration.
Well, the
So
first thing I noticed in looking for right now is that here we are right in the very beginning, and as part of our work when we updated the regulations here, working with you, inserted the language here that off-street parking facilities shall be provided. And this is part of the legacy of parking regulations. And many, years ago, decades ago, not quite a century ago, the idea is that, oh my gosh, on-street parking, it introduces congestion and traffic. It's a huge problem. We need to get rid of on-street parking. So most parking regulations were set up to say, okay, we're going to require off-street parking. That language is sort of considered here. So I just want to review our regulations for that, because I do think one of the things that makes Kent Village kind of special is in fact the on-street parking. I'm just going to move ahead a couple of pages here and point out something else we have. We do have a section 8250 about possible parking and loading modifications. And so we do have provisions that allow for reduction of parking and loading. And then the commission can consider reducing the requirement for your use. If Alice and I have buildings next to each other, and we agree to share our parking lot because our uses occur at different times of the day or days of the week, and we can, or the commission could consider a reduction of parking and loading requirements. Found some language in here that really didn't seem to apply well to Kent in terms of regularly scheduled transit stops and municipally supported shuttle buses. So I thought that those are elements that could be removed. There's also a consideration here about shared parking spaces. And this is, again, the offsetting uses I mentioned earlier. But I think we should also add, as Alice points out, and Adam mentioned as well, is the idea that the commission can consider the availability of on-street parking as being adequate for our use. The wine store came in and said, we want to double the size of our building and rely on the on-street parking. I think the commission should pause and reflect on that and determine whether or not they think that the parking spaces available in the vicinity will continue to support that, or is that too much or too intense? I think we should add something in the regulations related to that.
So Glenn, is it fair to say that if you're looking at a brand new development on a vacant piece of property, that parking shall be off-street parking? You have to really comply with the ratios if it's new work. Where we get into on-street parking is when we have a change of use and we consider parking for an existing building, not necessarily a new building. Is that correct?
I mean, I think generally the default position is for a new development to ensure the commission that it's providing adequate parking for its use, and ideally to avoid overstressing the on-street situation, to require those spaces to be off-street. If that doesn't work for historic lots and parcels fronting along, Route 7, for example, there are restaurants on Route 7. They have the most intensive parking requirements. The sites really aren't big enough to have off-street parking on them. Part of the thing that makes the center of Kent a little special is, can I find an on-street parking space there so I don't have to walk? So I think that can and should be a consideration that the commission can incorporate into its decision-making process.
But in any case, it can be, it's considered by the Planning and Zoning Commission, who has the final say on parking count. Is that?
I think we want to make sure we have language in here, Wes, that gives the commission that discretion.
Yeah.
I think as I'm reading this today, I'm not sure I'm finding the language about allowing the on-street parking spaces to be counted. And I think as Matt pointed out earlier, that's something that, and you just mentioned as well, the commission's been doing this, Adam mentioned it as well, that I think we need to make sure the regulations clearly point out, this is part of what makes Kent special. And so the commission can consider the availability of on-street parking in determining the adequacy for a particular use.
Well, that had always been, I thought, part of the regulation. For years we considered that.
I'm not seeing it in here today. I'll take another look for it, but I'm gonna want to make sure for you that that's certainly clearly spelled out in here.
Recently, just as an example, Kingsley's Tavern expanded, added more tables as they pushed into whatever that was next door. And when we looked at it, we discussed parking. We didn't add parking for them. We understood that there was street parking there. I mean, maybe we just have to add, and I'm curious to go back, honestly, to listen to how we came to that. I remember that we pretty much just said that, well, there's plenty of parking on the street. Maybe we just need to add language that pertains specifically to those retail establishments along Route 7 that we consider the on-street parking in deciding on the parking that's necessary.
Yeah.
However we write that.
And maybe, Ty, could you go back? Maybe it makes sense to go back to the previous iteration of the regulations, because I'm sure that there was something. I've got this really clear recollection.
Actually, if you look under 8250 CI, it does speak to the it's about the modifications to possible parking and the adequacy of space within 500 feet of the proposed development. So maybe that is what you've been using all along as your determining factor.
You're right, Ty. I had a conversation a few years ago with Donna Hayes about a business that wanted to open on Main Street, and we talked about parking, and I asked about how some of the existing businesses functioned because they didn't have a lot of parking on their own particular parcel. And that's exactly what she told me, that they were allowed to use 500 feet in either direction of the basically state highway or main street.
I think I like Ty's interpretation of that. I wasn't getting there quickly, but I think let's expand that language to make it abundantly clear that, I think as Adam pointed out, for uses fronting on Route 7, that, the availability of parking spaces along the highway is a consideration. In addition, availability of and adequacy of parking spaces within 500 feet will also stay in. So we're clarifying that beyond street spaces on Route 7 are a definite possibility for people to consider and incorporate. Anything else in terms of the parking regulations that you think you've struggled with over the past number of years, or things you'd like to include or address? Any
I
other-
have a question, Glenn. Are there any regulations regarding handicap spaces? We only have one handicap space on Route 7 in town.
I believe that there is, bear with me a second here. So as part of new parking requirements, new developments, new uses, et cetera, the number, size, designate, location, markings of parking spaces for the handicap shall be in conformance with this section of the general statutes and the Connecticut Building Code. So that if new parking spaces are added, the current provisions would apply.
Okay, Ann? Does that answer the question? All right. Glenn, I wonder, and this is for the balance of the commission as well, or is 1.5 spaces per studio, 1 bedroom? Is that too much? I mean, on the one hand, for me, it's a studio and 1 bedroom likely is going to be occupied by a single person. And therefore maybe just one parking space should be adequate. But on the other hand, there's guests, and sometimes there's a young couple or an old couple who are living in a 1 bedroom. So it seems to me that maybe we could reduce that to 1 as opposed to 1.5, but I wonder what everybody else thinks.
Matt, I had a question about that too. I didn't understand. It seems silly, but I didn't get the 1.5 spaces. What's the half do for anybody? I
Well,
don't
so if we had a
big
development
truck
of,
or-
we had 8 studio apartments in a building, this math would result in the requirement to install 12 parking spaces. So that works out to 1.5 spaces per unit. And the thought process here, as Matt indicated, is that you could have single occupants, one person living in a 1-bedroom apartment. They could be a couple. They could have guests over or people coming to visit, family, et cetera. So there's some ebb and flow in terms of the number of parking spaces. I recently came across a situation in another municipality in Connecticut where they adopted the 1 space for a studio apartment. An application has been submitted for an affordable housing development, 30 units with 30 parking spaces. And it's pretty apparent it's not going to be enough.
Yeah.
And because there are some units with more than 1 car associated with them. And so I think you need to have a little bit more. Does it have to be 0.5? I mean, perhaps it could be 0.25, which would mean on the 8-unit building, you'd have 10 spaces instead of 12. And it's really, again, sort of a requirement. The challenge in the other municipality is that it's a high-rise building and the fire department is worried they're not gonna be able to get equipment into the site to address these kinds of issues. So I think you want to have enough, but not too much. Our prior standards of 2 spaces or 2.5 spaces for dwelling unit, I don't think we needed that for a studio apartment. So I think we can definitely reduce that. And the question is what to? I think I would caution Matt to say that I think 1 is probably too low because we need to have some provision for couples, for guests, for those types of things. Does it have to be 1.5? No, it doesn't. 1.5 is definitely better than 2.5.
Well, I think we have to, as part of this discussion, we have to consider the fact that in Kent, for the most part, most of our apartments we don't have apartment buildings, with the exception of affordable housing and the condo units. We really don't have apartment buildings. So when we say a studio 1 bedroom is 1.5 spaces, that means 2 spaces.
For 1 unit, yes, it does.
For 1 unit, yeah.
Yeah, for 1 unit. And I don't think that that's too many. Because, if you've ever gone to go visit somebody and, and you can't find a place to park, where you're supposed to go.
Mhm.
We don't have a lot of, I just don't see where we have so many, besides some additional affordable housing structures in the future. I'm not seeing multi-unit buildings being built.
Yep.
So-
If,
And
Go
maybe
ahead, Matt.
I'm not looking at this correctly, but
No, I think that's mostly right. The concern, the only concern that I have is that we, it's through changes in the regulation have been trying to encourage, or at least allowing, more accessory dwelling units within the VR1, right? And so we're encouraging additional dwelling units, and most of those are going to be single bedroom, or it seems to me they're going to be smaller units for single bedroom or studios. Somebody's going to convert their garage, somebody's going to convert their upstairs, either it's a detached or an attached dwelling unit. And for those, maybe in the VR1, it makes sense to carve out something that says just a single parking space, because also in the
Yeah,
VR1, they've got access to the on-street parking. So maybe we should consider that.
I would agree with both of you. Now that I think about it, so this scenario is for an accessory dwelling unit. So as Karen started off saying, well, the 1.5 doesn't make any sense. You're right. If all you can do is add 1 unit, then 1.5 is silly. It doesn't make any sense. So we could make 1 space here because it's accessory to a single family dwelling which has 2. So now you've got 3 on the property. And so I think that can work. So I think if the commission is comfortable, we can change this to 1.
does anybody know, are you allowed to park on Route 7 in town during snowstorms? Is there any issue with, because the state plows it? I don't remember seeing signs. I don't know if that's,
I think the law is no overnight parking on state highways. That's what I think. I don't know that for sure, but we definitely don't have any signs in town.
so when we're talking about accessory dwelling units in town, we can't consider off-street parking. I mean, we can only consider off-street parking. We can't consider on-street parking as an alternative because you're not allowed to park there overnight.
That's a good-
Yes, but Adam, there are some properties that have little parking spaces right off the highway. It's considered part of their own property. I'm thinking of some of the area near Bridge Street. Those units there have a little smidgen of land, parking spaces.
Yeah,
right off, they're parked off the road, but the road, in other words, the property owner runs to that road, runs to the edge of the road.
Right, but that I would consider off-street parking.
Well,
That's, I'm saying that as we're looking at this, we can't, when we're talking about dwelling units, not retail, we can't consider on-street parking as additional parking because it's not allowed
Right.
overnight. That's why I just,
I'm glad we're having this conversation because I think the issue here, I do think residential is a special situation. And so if somebody on either Lane or Elizabeth said, I want an accessory dwelling unit, but I can't find a place to park. I don't have a place on my property to park, given the way the house is built or configured or whatever. I think that poses a bit of a challenge to have the parking in the middle of Lane or Elizabeth. So I think that what we could say is that on-street parking shall not be considered for residential uses, but parking in a right-of-way, which is either authorized by the town or the state. I mean, if you have a pull-off, which is in the state right-of-way, it's been there for years, yeah, you know what, you can count that. The state's not going to take that away from you. And if you say, well, I want to install a new one like that, I think it's incumbent on the applicant to show us that you have permission from the state to do so. So I think we want to try to get a little bit more flexibility here in our parking configuration. And I think that we can accomplish that.
Great.
So I think on the parking situation, I've got some homework to do. And I will go ahead and make that happen. And then our meeting in January, we'll take a look at the revised regulation. Make sure that we've hit the highlights, if you will. And then perhaps at that point in time, we might be ready to think about scheduling a public hearing on something. So are we okay on this? And I'll go ahead and make the changes and get back to everybody for the meeting in January.
there is one issue that has always been a pet peeve of mine, and that is that spaces in developed areas like where my office is in the barn shops are not the spaces are not painted, and the problem is that the inefficiency of the parking is quite bad because people don't know where to park and they don't know how to park. So while it's not aesthetic, and I appreciate that, it's absolutely not practical to say you've got X amount of parking when it's not striped, because people don't park that way. So that's not been in the requirement, and I personally think that it should be. I'm not saying that that existing parking in, say, the barn shops has to be painted, but anything new would be required.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can add language to say that, painted striping or striping shall be installed and maintained. I doesn't have time to go out there to check all the parking lots in town to make sure that they're maintaining their striping. But I think it could be an issue that, we would want to encourage people to maintain those over time.
Right. I mean, John Casey's development has the spaces painted, and I find it very useful. And the parking is far more efficient.
I think we can go ahead and add that
Wes,
in.
when I moved into Bridge Street, I had to paint my parking spaces. I mean, I was told that I had to. We don't have any regulation about
I
that.
don't see anything in the regulations that says it.
I'm with you. I think there should be. It makes things much more efficient.
And knowing that you have experience painting of parking spaces, we're going to put you on our task list on this.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
I also have a little bit of a pet peeve with regard to the regulations, and that is the fact that we define the parking spaces for a shopping center, but we don't define a shopping center, nor do we allow a shopping center as a use in the regulations. So we've debated this a number of times, or we've at least discussed this a number of times, that a shopping center is definable. Everybody knows what a shopping center is. So why do we have to define it or allow it? But I think that because we've got this shopping center, which has a different parking space requirement than everything else, that we should try to correct that. Either get rid of the shopping center or add a definition and add it as a permitted use.
Yeah, it should be a definition for sure.
I agree with that. Or we have to change shopping center, take it out.
Right. I mean, a shopping center is something, nothing gets approved as a shopping center in our regulations because it's not in there. It's not an allowed use, but everybody talks about Kent Green and everybody talks about the barns and even the, what's the space right in the middle of town called? The Kent Commons? Not Kent Commons.
Town center.
Town
Okay.
center, thanks, Ian. That those are considered, so I mean, I think people will consider those shopping centers if we're talking about parking, right?
What if we change shopping center to shared parking lots or shared parking areas? It'd be a lot easier to figure out a different name for shopping center than to start defining shopping center. And then when we put that definition for a shopping center that we don't allow in the first place, why do we have the definition if we don't allow it? And then do we have to start to allow it?
No, I think a great observation. I'm going to do a word search in the regulations for shopping center. I didn't find it quickly as I looked through the village business zoning district, so I'm just going to search for it. I think that.
But Glenn, excuse me,
yeah.
this is Alice. I recall a discussion we had at length about the word shopping center is a hot button word in Kent, Connecticut,
Okay.
because it relates to box stores, big box stores. So I think that it is a word, whether it's defined well or not, you got to be really careful using the word shopping center in the
Yeah, I know.
town
I think Mike-
character, in the character nature of like the POCD or something. It just doesn't fit with the character of Kent.
Yeah, I agree. I'm thinking, Alice, that what we could do here is delete this line item.
Oh, okay.
The other place that we talk about shopping.
Yeah, but where is it
Signs.
defined? It's not, it's a different parking requirement elsewhere. Can you call it a shopping development?
I think what I would
It's not
suggest
all words here.
that generally a shopping center is a collection of retail stores or personal service establishments.
I was
So-
going to say, instead of shopping centers, just retail establishments.
But-
We already have that here.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
as we're making this change, I just want us to think about the language that we used when we were discussing the shared parking agreements in the Kent Village Barns. We have the Kent Green, we have the Kent Center. These are all shared parking areas in these group retail and service areas. So I just want to, just thinking back to the language that we've used,
Yeah, that's a good point, Adam. So I made a note here. I'm going to check with Ty. We're going to do a little research here in terms of Kent Green, Kent Village Barns. If this is a legacy provision that was used for those developments, then that would cause us to come back to the commission and say we should keep this. My sense right now is that parking ratio is low enough that I think we would actually see on the ground that the parking is not as extensive as it is out there today. It seems to me that many of these places were built with, one space per 200. And, there's some vacancies out there. So we're going to allow Ty and I to do some due diligence on this and figure it out. But again, we don't want anything to backdoor us on a shopping center or anything else. We may have the opportunity to get mixed uses in the future. And that's exactly what the provisions for shared parking and mixed uses are intended to do, is to say, if you have residents occupying spaces at night and then employees and customers occupying those during the day, that's an efficient way to share the pavement, and that can work well for us. And to set that up in that way. But I don't think the shopping center definition does that for us. So kudos to you, Wes, and you, Matt, on your pet peeves. So good catches on those, and we can address those. Anything else on the parking regs? All right, so the ball is back in my court then to refine this for our meeting next month and move ahead. I think the next thing that I think is on the agenda overall is the discussion now of camps, resorts, et cetera. I know that the commission, Donna was keeping me informed that the commission was having conversations with regard to Club Getaway over the course of the past year or so. I haven't been part of those conversations, but I'm happy to have a chance to help the commission address these issues. What sorts of things do you hope to address or achieve as part of this?
So I think I'll start and say that Mr. Merriam put together a memorandum back in June of this year, where he outlined several different ways we could skin the cat of allowing either this or similar use in Kent, right? And I know this commission went back and forth as to which was the right way. He outlined several different types of regulations, right? So he went for as a right and through a site plan and as an overlay district. I missed one here. As a right, site plan, special permit, overlay district, or a planned development zone. He went into quite a bit of detail on planned development zone, and he actually recommended that that's what we do. I don't think that any of us on the commission thought that's what we should do, but we never really had a consensus. So I think it seems to me reasonable that we ask Glenn to take a look at what Mr. Merriam wrote, and then we can have a more in-depth discussion. Does that make sense to the balance of the commission?
I think that makes all the sense in the world. Have Glenn see that document.
I think I've got it, but I haven't read it yet. So I think that along the way it was shared with me. I think I skimmed it through when Donna sent it. I wanted this conversation to be about what the commission would hope to achieve. It seems to me that trying to find a balance here between, control of the types of uses and activities that go on there. So many times zoning relates to a building or a parking lot. And so you can say to somebody, well, you can't have a CO until the building is built in accordance with the plans that you showed us, and the parking lot, is paved like you said you would, and the drainage is installed. So we're able to hold up a CO. The challenge with uses like a camp is that the uses can change over time, or even a resort. And so I did see some information when I Googled some of the other stuff in terms of loud music over the course of a weekend, bands playing late at night, etc. And it's hard. People can come to you and say, oh, everybody's going to shut down by 9 o'clock. When the crowd's screaming at 9 o'clock for an encore, it's probably 9:30 and then it's 10 and then it's 10:30 or whatever else is going to happen. It really becomes a huge challenge with zoning to address those kinds of issues. So I've done some work on these kinds of issues, and they can be some of the toughest ones. So the question ends up is, how do we sort of enforce promises about, you know, how many portalets they're going to have, or when the music's going to stop, or they won't start before 8 in the morning, etc. Those can be the biggest challenges. Have
Glenn-
these been challenges on any other properties in town, or really just the one?
But
Glenn,
we do have challenges of noise on properties.
part of my concern is, there's a couple of them. One, for the owners of Club Getaway, if we don't do anything at all, well, then they can't ever do anything. They can't ever make a change to what they do, and I don't think that's fair. I think they should be able to come before us to make a modification or add something and let us consider it. The problem is how do we, at least for me, how do we create a regulation that brings them into compliance, that allows them to be an entity, a resort there, but doesn't open up the Pandora's box of allowing resorts everywhere else in Kent, everywhere else in the rural zone.
Amen.
Because that could be really problematic.
So ultimately, right, we're looking, Club Getaway has been operating in that location for a very long time, certainly before most of the neighbors have moved in, purchased their houses, and so we want to try to be sure that Club Getaway can continue to operate in much the same manner that they've been operating for the past, at least midterm, right? Maybe not the way they were operating in 1970, but certainly the way they were operating in 2000, right? So we want to somewhat codify what they've got, what they're doing, allow them to continue what they're doing, and also to not allow them to do too much more or anything more than what they've typically been doing to protect the neighbors from the all night music. Right. So, typically they've been operating until some time at night, and they've told us what time that is, and it's on a couple of days on the weekend. So we'd like to codify it so that the neighbors can understand what Club Getaway is allowed to do, what Club Getaway can understand what they're allowed to do, and then limit that use to, I think, where it is, or maybe some other, and I'm not even sure whether there's some other properties in Kent. So it seems to me, listening, that it's probably an overlay zone that we want, and the overlay zone wants to be in the spot where they are now.
Yeah, so I think I appreciate your comment, Matt and Adams, too, about let's sort of focus on having this location work, but not letting it spread too far afield in terms of townwide regulation. So that can either be a specific zone or an overlay zone. And we can craft that so that at least initially we're dealing with one property. I think a scenario that has worked, I believe, in other communities is that the applicant is required to submit an operating plan. And maybe operating plan is not the right phraseology, but let me call it a management plan. And the issue is, yes, we are going to be able to have camp activities, generally run, weeks or weekends, X number of people, hours of operation are Y, amplified music on one night a week till 9 o'clock, whatever it's going to be, right? So they can specify it. And to set it up in a situation that they can get a license each year to renew that management plan. And as long as they have behaved well, then Ty could have the ability to sign off on that annual renewal. If, on the other hand, Things have gotten out of hand. They have abused the trust and relationship, their promises to the community. I cannot. And she would ship it back to the commission to revisit the management planning. And so is it the functional equivalent of calling Club Getaway on the carpet and say, look, you told us that, X number of days a week or whatever. Might be one way to address this situation. Rewards good behavior, and on bad behavior, it's like, we're gonna have to revisit this. What's your thoughts or reactions to that type of situation?
I don't think we have that tool. I don't think we have the ability
Yeah.
to
Well, we-
license anybody.
But
That's
yes,
not
we do
something-
have that tool because Club Getaway is a non-conforming use. And they have submitted a management plan.
Yes, they have.
We have all of those in place. Right now, Club Getaways exists as a non-conforming use.
No, I know, but one, at least for me, I thought the idea was to get them into a conforming use for them to be able to operate going forward. But also, I didn't think that we had a way to license them. It's not that we can't do the things that Glenn just said and ask for the things that Glenn just said, but we don't have a license. We don't have that. Are we just making this up? I mean, we don't.
I
that's
think,
not a-
Adam, it's
Adam, I totally agree with you. The word license, just my.
No, I think license was,
License is a legal term, guys, like
that was the wrong word.
that's not the right word. And I'd like to know how this relates to the subject of wedding venues. What if somebody starts having, a special event wedding venue and they play music all night? How does Club Getaway differ from that?
By the way, I don't know if Glenn, if you ever got this, but they did give us a breakdown, which was pretty
Yeah.
well done of
Right.
everything that they do. And PS, on there are weddings, okay, which is fine. It works there. I guess I just keep going back to, well, what else do they want to do? Because they're pretty much doing everything. And the other last thing I'd like to ask is, recently they had a concert there. Okay, I didn't go there. I only saw it on Facebook, my newspaper. So did they get permission from us for that? I don't think so. I think they use their own discretion, and they've been there since 1939 or something. And most of everything they're doing has been okay. So I guess this is why in the beginning, I didn't think we needed to rewrite a big regulation, because I think they're doing everything they could do. Going forward to what? If it was going to be turned into a resort or something else, that would be a whole other application. That's why I thought we should just leave them alone and let them exist the way they are. But I said I would keep an open mind. So I'm keeping an open mind.
I just
But
thought for David, he's in the position now that he can't even do everything on what he gave us in that operating. He can only, they're not in compliance, so he can't change anything, do anything. He's very limited going forward. And what if he wants to, anything he would want to change to, Karen, he would have to come before us.
That's my whole point. That's my whole point.
But it doesn't matter now because he's not in compliance. It doesn't matter if he comes before us or not, because we can't let him do anything because he is not in compliance. He is non-conforming. So the answer is always, or really always has to be no.
So I think we could create a new paradigm. The paradigm that I'm thinking about, Ty, just make a note. I think what Karen has, I'm not sure I have. So I'd like to be able to see that. Okay,
I have it. I'll get it to you.
perfect. So
Are music or concerts on that list, Karen?
yeah, you're muted,
Unmute,
Karen.
I didn't remember them being on the list.
Yeah.
Those
No,
have been-
no, unless I'm missing a page, which is totally possible in my life, but everything that's listed is pretty, he does a lot of different things, or he lists his ideas, and there's no concert on here.
Yeah, I don't see concerts either.
So my
We don't have
thought
to accept
process,
everything on that.
my thought process at this point in time is to create, whether it's an overlay zone or a planned development zone, whatever we might call this, we create an attractive approach that they would apply into. As a result, the commission would approve this, they would no longer be non-conforming. So we could get them out of the non-conforming box, subject to their agreement to certain operating principles. The question then is, how do we keep them in this box that we have defined for what's okay? So if the Rolling Stones final tour was about to come to Club Getaway, it just seems to me that that would have to be a
Great, that'd be
special
great.
ask, right? Is that that's not something that they would have considered as part of their thing. So maybe that's a special ask, but we try to keep them in a box. I think I was reading, I think Donna had put together sort of a date file, a history file going back, and I think I think shared that with me. And so it showed a lot of information about things that had happened there historically in terms of, you know, activities and times that, you know, they kind of said they were going to do something and then stepped over the line and did something different. And that's a problem. And so the question is, there needs to be repercussions, because if promoters are running the show there and the property owner is not, then it's probably going to get out of hand. But if there's a repercussion for the property owner to say, look, if you go outside of these boundaries, we may be in a situation that I called it a license, I'll find a better word, that your ability to conduct these activities in the next year is either limited or won't be renewed.
What if, can we do a special, like a special permit with it, you know, as an overlay zone, which really gives us incredible leeway in the ability to put limitations, and the simple ramification is do things that weren't listed, and we revoke your special permit, and then he can't do business.
I absolutely agree with that. That fits within. So if we make this special overlay district, or make that use a permitted use via special permit in that overlay zone, then we can use the special permit to regulate what happens there. And if we're getting complaints from the neighbors that they're doing things, or I don't want to put too much pressure on the enforcement of this, but if there is a situation where they're stepping outside of the bounds of the special permit, then we have the right to revoke the special permit or call them in front of the commission. And I think that's the mechanism for the control, as opposed to introducing something new to the regulation. And incidentally, that's why I think that an overlay district is better than that special use zone, because we know what an overlay district is. It sort of fits within our regulations, and rather than introducing some new mechanisms.
I think I have a general gist of what the commission's looking for. There's a couple of things that come to mind. The first of which is recalling a recent court case that allowed a commission to establish time limits on a special permit. It was generally sort of the approach of the court that a special permit was something got filed on the land records and ran with the land. But then they came to the conclusion, like, well, hang on a second here. The reason that you might have approved a special permit might change over time with the evolution of a neighborhood or whatever, and what was appropriate at one time isn't appropriate later. So yes, you can condition a special permit on time. But I think that's a pretty big threat for somebody, is like, you no longer have permission to run a camp there. You're putting everything at risk or jeopardy. We don't want to do that. I'm pretty sure that they don't want to do that. They want to have a reasonable business model, but we have to agree on how we're going to work this through. I'm also familiar with this situation. Has anybody heard of what's called Grace Farms in New Canaan?
Yeah.
So Grace Farms is this incredible facility in New Canaan. They started to expand their program far beyond their original mission, which was a church. They had Ariana Grande do a concert there. A lot of other stuff went on, and they got into this whole situation with the town, which is fairly similar to what you've described to me. And I believe that the town has found a way to resolve that. So I'm going to reach back out to them and figure out what they have done, put my thinking cap on, and come back to you. So I think I have enough to go to the next step, if you will, in terms of this. I am familiar and friendly with Dwight. Miriam, would you think it could be advantageous for me to have a chat with him to learn his history, or just let them do their thing and we'll do our thing and meet up later? What's your guidance to me on that?
Maybe.
The nice thing is that this is being done for Club Getaway, and Marion was Club Getaway's attorney. So
Yep.
what he did was in agreement with Club Getaway. So.
But
that's-
Miriam,
that-
Miriam is also a legal advisor to one of our lawsuits.
That's right. That's what I would say too, is that Miriam is a party to the North Main litigation.
Well, it still doesn't mean. I'm
Not on
not
the town's behalf.
work with them, but
Not
but
on
the
the town,
document
against the
is
town.
still a document that came from Club Getaway.
Understand. So I think I will work with Ty to make sure that I have as complete a record as possible. I'll do some research and investigation, come back to the commission. We'll have further discussion on this. Following that, if we think it might be advantageous, I can reach out to a fellow colleague to kind of discuss this issue without, putting the commission at jeopardy or risk or anything else. But I agree. I don't think we're ready to do that yet. So, Ty, I don't know if I need to make a trip out to sort of pick up stuff, see what you got, or kind of go through your file, just to make sure I've got everything I need. But you and I can communicate on that.
We'll work together. I probably could scan, if you don't need to make a trip. I'll scan you what you need.
And I still got some Christmas shopping to do here, Ty. I'm a little behind right now. Oh, is that out loud? Oh, I'm sorry. So then I
Are we
think,
using, excuse me, are we using camp and resort, those two words interchangeably?
no, I think I'm struggling a little bit to kind of think about what this is, right? I mean, I think years ago, it was a camp. And
Well,
it's-
he uses them interchangeably.
David.
how do you feel? If I came from Midwest and said, hey, I'm coming to town, I've heard about this thing, what is that? What would you say? How would you describe it to me or to somebody else?
But you know what, Glenn, we have camps here. Like
Yes, you do.
legitimate summer camps.
Yes,
So I don't want this to interfere with our regulations for summer camps. And so I think that has to be different. I
So
think-
we define camp as as a place for people under 18. That's a camp.
So
We
he-
also have a pretty stringent, we have a pretty defined, that's a dumb way to say, we have a definition for clubs too. So camps and clubs are defined by the regulations. Neither one of them really fit with Club Getaway. Resort sort of fits with what they do, but I don't like that word for our regulations.
all right, let me put my thinking cap on. I do think we're carving out a unique situation here. There is a zoning tool which allows us to address this in a site-specific way. I think the name could be important. So I agree that camp is defined as under 18, so that's not going to work. Resort sort of leaves a different impression. So let me think about what that might be. But it's like developing a subdivision, then you have to come up with street names. It's the hardest part, trying to figure out what to name the streets. And this could be a kind of similar situation, but I think I've got some work to do before that. So that's very helpful information. Thank you very much. I think the last thing that for us to talk about tonight is senior housing. I think is the email that I received back said senior housing, and then in parentheses, assisted living, memory care, skilled nursing. The commission noted a need to better define its use and possibly replace convalescent home. So what are your thoughts on this?
We allowed what's defined in our regulations as convalescent homes in the VR1 and the rural residential. We decided, somewhat in the near past anyway, that we didn't think that convalescent home, as we had defined it, was an appropriate use for the rural zone. So I think the first thing that we should decide as a commission is, since we don't like convalescent home in the rural district, and let me just one quick step back. We're allowing convalescent homes stayed in the regulations as a defined term and is allowed in the VR1 and VR2. Those are the only locations where it's allowed now. So there's several facilities that are in the rural zone which are now pre-existing non-conforming. So for me, I think that we should have, the regulations should allow for this long-term elder care within the VR1 and VR2, and I think that does. So the first question is, do we need to change the regulation, the definition of convalescent home for the VR1 and VR2? And then the second question is, do we want to allow this sort of long-term elder care and short-term care, which is not age restricted? Do we want to allow that in the rural zone again?
This whole business we're in is all about words. The word senior housing is not a good word here for what we're talking about.
I think
I mean,
it is.
huh?
I think it is. So I've done
Senior
several-
housing and convalescence are not the same thing. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
it's
viewed it as being
the whole affordable housing business is about
I'm not
mainly.
talking about affordable
senior-
housing.
I know you're not. But that's what senior housing primarily is.
Yeah,
You
but
know?
I viewed it as being a category. So let me do this. I think what I'm going to do is reach out and go through the state hierarchy, if you will, of the different types of facilities that are out there that cover different needs. So we have assisted living. Yes, we have congregate care. We've got other types of facilities. Let me get the terminology that we need to be working with straightened out, and that'll be part one of our conversation. And then I think the question in a sense is, as Matt pointed out, I think we could perhaps agree that the VR1, VR2 might be appropriate areas for these types of facilities. Oftentimes they tend to be a little bit larger in terms of building size. They could look like a grand historic home in some way, shape, or form. They're served by public water and sewer. So as a result, they could, they're not going to produce pedestrians on the streets, let's say, but it's going to help to enhance our village center area. Now the question could be outside of that. Are there places, either along a state highway or other parts of the RU1 that this could work? And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that now, or you want to see what the different types of uses are that kind of come back and say, thumbs up on this and thumbs down on that. How would you guys like to proceed?
Because I'm not sure what we're talking about when, if we're talking about, senior housing, like what we have in town.
You mean like Templeton
Now-
Farms?
I'm sorry,
The elderly housing, Kent
which is income based, or what you pay
and affordable housing, yeah.
is, and but then there's what I'm gonna say, what I call a convalescent home, which is a
Medical.
more medical, somewhere that a senior might, who can't live on their own, might have to be, or after something happens to them, they might need to be there, like the Kent used to be. We had that. The Kent was there. The Kent, a senior citizen could be there to recover from whatever it happened to have been. It wasn't necessarily long-term at all. But I'm not sure what, Matt, I'm not sure what we're talking about here in this. So what is it that we're looking to define, I
So
guess?
can I share my screen just for a minute? Sure. So over the summer, I had several conversations with clients of mine who run elder care facilities. You know, certainly none of them are in Connecticut, but these couple of people have been doing this for, you know, they've been doing this for a long time. And all right, so let me make this bigger. Hold on, I have to stop sharing just for a second. It should be better. And I got a sense from them the different types of elder care, right? So we've got this independent living, which is single family homes, townhomes, or planned communities for self-sufficient seniors, right? So that's one category. And then we've got this assisted living, including memory care, which you know, they're typically 2 to 3 story apartments, but they don't have to be. They provide 24-hour assistance with activities for daily living activities. So these are people who need some help, but they're not incapacitated amongst themselves, right? And this includes memory care. So people who, you know, that they're starting to diminish mentally. And then there's skilled nursing. So those are the three categories in general of permanent living care for seniors, for elders. And skilled nursing is these people that they require real care, and this is medical care. And then a subset of all of this is adult daycare, and adult daycare can be any one of those independent living, assisted living, or skilled nursing. You know, people they get dropped off in the morning by their families when they go to work, and then they get picked up and they go home, and they're allowed to age in place. And age in place is a big that's somewhat of a catchphrase. It's sort of somewhat important for people to be where they are and to be able to age where they are. It doesn't necessarily mean in their home, but wherever they're living, wherever they move into, that they can go from independent to assisted to skilled nursing, and stay in the same place so they don't have to be disrupted. And then the last category is this short-term care, where people who are not age restricted, but they need some place to go in order to be rehabilitated. And that's physical rehabilitation or mental rehabilitation or substance abuse rehabilitation. So there's these categories that of care that I think they at least capture everything that I'm thinking about. And I'm not quite sure where all these things fit. I think almost all of these things fit within the village residential, the VR1 and VR2. I don't know that they fit in the rural zone. But that's how I kind of wanted to frame this conversation.
Matt, is that something that you could share with me?
Absolutely. Yeah, I
Thank
think that Ty might have this already, but I can forward this over. Easy peasy.
And honestly, I'd love to read that.
I think what Matt just shared there was the type of hierarchy I was hoping to create for you, and he's just short-circuited all of that effort, I think, by giving us a framework to work within, and then we could start to think about the possible implications of these sizes or types of facilities in terms of where they may fit best. And we may say things like, you know, I mean, is the Kent, you had mentioned the Kent, was that the one that's on 341 on the right-hand side as I'm headed up the hill out of town? It's back in the woods. It used to be, I think, some sort of rehab facility or something, but it's not anymore or something? Is that what?
Yeah, the other way around.
Okay, thank you.
The Kent is basically next to the town dump, the town
Yep.
transfer station.
Yeah, in the back, right?
Driveway. The Kent was an elder rehabilitation center, hospital.
And before that, it was a corporate center.
Before that, it was a
Well,
corporate
it
center.
was, yes.
And now,
I don't think it was just elder. I think it was for anybody.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. I only knew old elder people went there and now it's been accepted and I don't know if they're ever going to make this happen, but it's another rehab facility.
They've got building permits.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess they're going to move forward with that.
So I think the
A drug and
question,
alcohol rehab facility.
Wes, do you know whether that means that they got their certificate of need from the state, from the Department of Health?
Matt, I don't know that specifically, but I have seen the plans and I've seen the building officials poring over them in order to issue a permit.
I thought they got their certificate of need
Yeah.
actually quite some time ago. I mean, well over a year ago, 2 years ago. I thought that, High Watch fought them, they won, and High Watch tried again, they won, but then nothing was really happening. I think there was a process of it being sold to somebody else, and somebody else had to take it over as the director. There were some things that were,
Well, I think they've been, 8, 9, 10 months in design.
Yeah.
From that time, yeah.
Okay.
that too, so.
all right, so I think I might have enough now. Matt can share that information. I can see what I can compile from statutory language, state programs, et cetera, to kind of explain these, and then we can actually kind of go through these in a structured way. I noticed in Matt's material, it had some possible references to whether it was permitted in the VR1, VR2, et cetera. Bingo, we may already be in a place and now we just need to start using consistent language. So we may be talking about updating the definitions, incorporating the newest phraseology, et cetera, to reflect where we're at, and just confirm our approach as to what it is we would like to do for the future. So I'll take the lead on that. Matt, if you can share what you've got, I think I pretty much have everything I need for next month.
That's great. You guys should have that, or you should all have that now, or at least it's in the ether on its way through.
Perfect.
That's terrific. So Matt, I need to take off after this and not get into 3D.
Okay, Wes, we'll miss you.
Well, thank you. So good night.
Thank you, Wes.
Hey, Wes.
So there is one other thing on the agenda, Matt. You're going to lead that?
Yes, and yes, I'll lead that. Let me preface this by saying you all can overrule me with the simple wave of a wand, right? So I've been not uncomfortable with, but I think that I would like it if we defined the use for the Southern Gateway, because the land trust is using that property as a farmer's market, which we allowed by special permit, and the land trust has taken over the hosting of the concerts over the summer concerts, the Friday concert series, which used to be at the town hall and were allowed they were allowed on town property because the town property isn't subject to zoning. And then there's also that special event that the land trust does every year with the town for the land trust, the annual picnic on Memorial Day. And all of those uses I think are really good. I think that land really lends itself to those kinds of uses. So I wanted to find a way to allow how the land trust uses that property via the regulations. So we didn't run afoul of other people who wanted to do similar things and wasn't allowed, and they could point to what we're allowing the land trust to do on that property, and we would be somewhat in a pickle. I talked to Ty briefly about it. And I think Ty came up with an elegant solution for special events for not-for-profits. And I guess the first thing is to ask whether you all agree with me that what that property is being used for now is somewhat outside of the regulations.
I guess I'm not sure what it's zoned to allow right now. And I did want to make a correction. Before the concerts were in town, they were in that field. They were in that field for years, and then for a short term, they moved into town, and now they're back in the field. I've got pictures of me with my
Oh,
kids,
God, no.
shoulders dancing to N Train, you know, when my 20-year-old would go on.
I'm
tour.
I'm
That
gonna
was
want
a
to see
long
those,
ago.
Adam. I'm gonna want to see those.
Matt, is your concern that more people, like the field across the road from the one you're talking about, will suddenly start doing the same thing? And so that property south of town suddenly becomes Club Getaway. And sorry, I'm making a joke, but what is your concern about it? Just because it isn't, because it's in the rural district? Or, I mean, I'm not sure I understand, Matt, why, what the big deal is.
So I don't want to make it a big deal, but I suppose by bringing it up in this forum, I have made it a big deal. But the way I read the regulation is that those uses are not permitted by, I mean, the farmer's market, the commission decided that fit within the regulations. But I don't think the concerts and the picnic do. I think those are special events. And I don't think an ongoing concert right now is permitted by the regulations. And I want to find a way to bring that use into conformity. Now, if you guys think that I'm wrong, and if you think it's perfectly acceptable for those uses within the regulations, then just tell me and we can drop it.
Well,
You say,
the picnic has always been in conjunction with Memorial Day weekend and the end of the parade.
Mhm.
So is that a town event?
It's not a
is that
town event.
legit- huh?
Just so we're clear, the picnic, I don't see how that falls into any of this. That is a private property. It's owned by the Kent Land Trust. The Kent
Right.
Land
No,
Trust
I
puts
understand
that
that.
on and invites the town. It is not a town event. It is a Kent Land Trust event.
No, I understand that.
The only event that's happening there that is a town event is the concert series. But it is a private property, and a private entity, nonprofit or private, can decide that they want to have a picnic on their property and invite people to come. They don't charge for it. It's free. The Kent Land Trust foots the bill. And just so we're clear, I'm obviously a little biased here because I'm wearing a Kent Land Trust hat. And but it's a private property. And I don't know how we can regulate whether a private landowner, if they want to have a picnic and invite everybody from the town and it's free, to regulate that. The farmer's market is a different thing because we're selling stuff, and we kind of pushed it through because we all wanted it to be there, but I don't know that special permit really totally holds up. And maybe we need to adjust something for that. And I don't know how the concert series works out. Maybe we do need to look at that. So we've addressed it, but I don't think the picnic should be within this.
You don't think the picnic is a special event?
It's a special event for the Kent Land Trust, and they invite the town, but it's not a town event. I mean, I'm a little concerned about our putting a regulation on what a private property owner does. If a private property owner, if it's not the Kent Land Trust, if it's somebody up in the rural zone, further away, has a big field, and they say, hey, we want to have a picnic for the whole town and they can come and it's free. Are we regulating that? Because I believe that that's allowed. And a town-sponsored concert, I think, is different. and maybe we should look at that. But the Kent Land Trust, they foot the bill for all of that. They do everything for that concert. And I mean, for that picnic. And I just don't, I don't see how our regulating and somebody having a picnic, because Matt, if you wanted to do that in your fields, would that be a special event that had to be regulated? If you said, look, I'm really psyched that I live here and I want to invite the town to a picnic at my house, and you put up a tent and you have a picnic. I think you're allowed as a landowner to do that on your property.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think that if one of your boys was getting married, and you wanted to do it on your property, you could actually absolutely put up a tent and hire a caterer and, bring a food truck or do anything you wanted to on your property, right? So it's the question as to whether the land trust is different than an individual owner, right? Is it private property owned by the land trust or stewarded by the land trust? And are they different than you or I as an individual? If they're not, then that's great. Then they are a private landowner and they don't have, so we don't have to worry about the picnic. I think the picnic is great. And I participate in the
I know
picnic
you do. I know
with
you.
the Scouts. We're there, and I think it's tremendously beneficial for the town. I think the concert's tremendously beneficial. I think the farmers market is tremendously beneficial. It brings us all together, and I think it's wonderful and great.
I know that you support it. I didn't think that you didn't support any of it.
Okay. I wanted to say it out loud.
And I did think we pushed the farmer's market through because it was the right thing to do, but maybe it didn't quite work.
And to answer Alice's question, I am a little bit worried that there are others who are private property owners who might decide that they want to have, 5 events a year. And that might be.
That would be Woodstock.
Or Goshen stock. But listen, let me share my screen and I think we should continue this conversation.
Matt, speaking of sharing your screen, the piece you had before on elder care.
Yeah.
Are you going to share that with all the commission?
Yeah, you should have that now, Alice. I
Oh.
responded. I replied all to the.
Oh,
email
I'm
that you
sorry.
sent the other
Excuse
day.
me. Okay, sorry.
Did you get it?
Yeah, I see now. Mhm.
Okay, great.
Thank you for that, Matt.
got
I
it.
got it.
Thank you.
So this after the conversation that Ty and I had, like I said, elegantly, she came up with something in like 4 seconds and said, this is 9,300 temporary uses, right? So everything that's in black is what that page 153 of the current regulation says. So, Ty suggested this addition, and I think this would be number 7 under other nonprofit and governmental special events. And within any zoning district, the commission may authorize a series of temporary events in a calendar year with approvals from the town of Kent's delegated health and safety officials. So if we think that the farmers market doesn't quite fit into, I think this can cover the farmers market because it's a series of events. We can have the schedule. The land trust has already provided us with somewhat of a parking plan and a nature and type of activities description. But this would be something that we could talk to them about once a year. At the same time, we could talk about the concert series that's happening there on that property.
I have a question. So this would be for all zones and specifically for not-for-profits.
Mm-hmm.
And does this open up a can of worms for us specifically with High Watch? does this all of a sudden enable them to intensify their use by utilizing their fields, which they're not supposed to utilize in a different way because they're not for profit, by creating this regulation? And I don't know the answer to that. I mean, we do have restrictions on they're not intensifying their uses. I'm always concerned when we write a regulation where that, what the unintended results are of it.
You know, it's off the cuff, Adam, it seems that would all afford us, you know, maybe more more control over what they do, because then it becomes regulated as a special event.
Okay.
But I think, you know, maybe Glenn should answer or weigh in anyway.
I'm enjoying the conversation here. I'm trying in my mind to reconcile the direction we may go with Club Getaway, where we're regulating almost similar types of events on private property and want to kind of, you know, have a tight leash on that. And I kind of wonder whether or not something like what you have here in red might provide a complementary scenario for nonprofit and government special events. And it could be as simple as maybe even a letter from the land trust. We're planning on running on Memorial Day, our annual picnic, just like we did last year. Boom, off and running. Yes, you're good to go.
And also, Glenn, the land trust or the government or those events, unlike Club Getaway, are not making money.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Or
It's
if they
free.
are, I mean, if the
No,
land trust had food tents, but the money's going back into paying for the porta potties or
wrong,
something. then-
wrong.
No,
Okay.
not
They
that.
don't-
That
No, they do not collect any money,
it's completely free. They
completely free.
put the bill for the town. It is entirely, it's just what they do for the town.
It is a nonprofit organization. They do not receive any revenue from any, even, or the farmer's market.
Yeah, so the only
Not a fundraiser.
corollary that occurs to me is that perhaps you know my office, I live in Simsbury. Simsbury has the Performing Arts Center here. And the Hartford Symphony plays concerts, I think it's 6 times a year or whatever. So the Performing Arts Center is a nonprofit organization. They run food or they rent out food concessions and use it to pay for the music acts that come. So we just sort of need to think about the way that somebody might approach this differently than a land trust. I think the land trust does sounds like a wonderful event. But within this umbrella, are there other ways that other people, I guess, you know, they'd have to be a nonprofit, they'd have to apply for it. We might need one more criteria in there, man. I'm not quite sure. I'm not
Would-
wild about the word approvals in there. With input from the health and safety officials. But I think the other issue is one related to, you know, just kind of other considerations.
So let me slip this over. This would be in conjunction with this would be the special event permit application that somebody would fill out. And Glenn, to your point, we've got the fire marshal's signature down here and the health department signature only if serving
There you
food. So we could certainly, you know, at the pleasure of the commission, you know, get rid of these things, or say fire marshal's signature where the event is indoors, you know, something like that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, the health department, in terms of porta potties and, you know, water supply. So, but keep going, I'm with you.
So it's just that this special event permit application, the suggestion now, and again, at the pleasure of the commission, is that we've got that simple language in the regulation that allows this within the special permitted section, special permitted use, not special permitted use, special event use within the regulations, coupled with the special event permit application that's made to the Planning and Zoning Commission, to land use for consideration and approval, and everybody goes on their merry way. So the land trust or whatever, the not-for-profit comes in and says, this is what we want to do, this is where we want to do it, these are the provisions for parking, and these are the dates we're going to do it, or these are the perimeters, we're going to do it every Friday, rain, weather permitting, from May until October.
And there would be no cost for the permit.
Right, Ty? That's,
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like there's a lot of cost that the office would incur, so I don't see why there would be a fee. But I guess, in order to create a fee, we would have to go to town meeting, so that would be complicated in itself. So it'd be best not to. I don't know, I think like in the case of High Watch, I mean, I think it affords you the ability to locate where appropriate places are for such events. So, in the example that you gave and the fear that you have, you might find that not an appropriate place for a concert series because it's a residential neighborhood, whereas the land trust property seems a little bit more appropriate for it. So it gives you that discretion. In my mind, that's what I was thinking. As far as the sign offs by the fire marshal and the health department, traditionally, that's how, a lot of towns do any kind of special events, is that they'll circulate it around to all the departments and everybody will sign off. So everybody has an opportunity to chime in their own, fields as to any concerns they might have with a big event like that.
and this was somewhat modeled as Ty somewhat alluded, this was modeled on another town in Connecticut. Or at least this permit application that we're looking at now.
I don't have a problem with this. I mean, I think it keeps everybody posted on what's going on and keeps everybody honest. And as far as High Watch goes, they're probably just going to do it anyways if they feel like it. So this would be a process where we would have some idea and we're not caught surprised. Like I was surprised about the concert that was at what do you call it, Getaway.
I am too. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is just a way to keep everybody on the straight and narrow. I don't see anything harmful about it. Everyone can still do what they want to do. I don't think we're taking away landowners' rights. In fact, the recent concert, which I missed, I wish I had gone to, was on the Kent Green, right? Last weekend.
Oh, yeah.
So that's another example of a private, I guess, private property owner holding something on his property. So I mean, there's nothing harmful on this form. I think it's probably a good idea. Just
Alice, do you have any more thoughts on just from a global standpoint?
You mean on this application, special event?
Yeah,
form?
just on the idea of whether we need to do anything special for that property in terms of the uses that I've outlined.
Oh, you mean the Kent Land Trust property?
Yeah, the Southern Gateway.
To me, I think you're kind of opening up worms that I didn't realize it was an issue. So this has kind of caught me by surprise.
I don't think there's an issue, Alice. I think this is just accountability. I mean, that's just my opinion after I read it.
Well, I'm sure that the land trust would fill us out in a minute. I mean, it's not. But I thought Matt, like everything else, we try to think, are we going down a slippery slope? And the land trust is doing this then High Watch will do it, then the school will do it on the playground, who's to stop the school from putting in roller coasters and having a, picnic for the Parents Association? I'm not sure where all this is, what we're trying to regulate here.
Well, years ago, the firemen had their fair there, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
I suppose they got permits, or they had the fire marshal or health department there. I mean, I think that's
As the
standard.
fire marshal,
I would think so.
I'm joking. It's the fire department.
No, oh, yeah, I see what you mean. Okay.
It is.
Only
you
thing
know,
that occurs to
the
me too-
field has a history of being used for recreational purposes and being available, for that purpose. Whether it was, I mean, right now they're hosting the town concert series, but in years past, when the town concert series were there, it was the town hosting them. The only reason why the land trust stepped in to host them was because there were issues with the park and rec and being able to do it. So the Kent Land Trust stepped in and said, look, we'll do it. If you can't seem to make this happen, we can make it happen.
How does this relate to back in the day when the Litchfield Jazz Festival was at Kent School, or that series of speakers was,
That was treated as a special event, and they got a special event permit.
okay,
Exactly,
okay,
exactly.
okay.
What does High Watch, do they have to do anything for their annual picnic that they have? I think it's in September.
I don't think they have to do anything for it. It's something that they told us they were going to do in their special permit application, and they do it in their facility.
I think too, they don't open it to the public, right? It's
Yeah,
strictly
not
for
open.
their,
Oh, that's right.
it's open, it's to their guest and their guest family. I don't think you and I. can
And
go.
their alumni.
And
Yeah,
they do it on this side of the road that that the facility is on. They utilize their kitchen, and they utilize their auditorium. At least up to now, it has not been on the other side of the road, which would, so they're not falling into the place where they're, I don't think with their increasing their intensity of use, because it's something we've known all the time.
I think there's a case to be made that is a special event, right? That's, and I think by virtue of them being a business, not a private, and private's probably even the wrong word, but not an
They're
individual.
not for profit.
Right, but not an, I think that a business, which a not-for-profit is a business, right? That's in the basic understanding of it. They're not really an individual entity, right? So I think that you've got a difference between a business and an individual. And I think businesses, if they're having an event, it should be a special event. An argument can be made that that's a special event. And they should be getting they should be filling out a special event. They should be getting a permit for that special event.
So what happens when, so I'm just not sure where the special event stops. And so let's say a school is having a big tournament. There's going to be 10 other schools there. Is that a special event if they haven't done it before? I mean, you know what? I'm not, Matt, I'm not trying to be jerky here. I'm trying to understand what we're going to call a special event. When I understand what you're saying about High Watch, but when I look at that, it's in their facility on the part of the grounds that they do those things. And that they conduct their business. And so is that a special event? I mean, yes, but is it one that requires a permit? I'm not sure. And and then, so when is it that one of our prep schools has an event? When is that a special event that requires them to come in to get an additional special event permit?
Is the library party, the annual library party, if they do it at Marvelwood, is that a special event, or they do it at South Kent? Is that I would say that's probably a special event. Is Marvelwood having a wrestling tournament, or a play? I think that's not a special event, because that's sort of ancillary. It's a use that's ancillary to their primary use.
Yeah,
But
but it
the-
makes sense to check with Newtown to see if there's a size threshold. In other words, if it's less than 100 people, maybe it sort of falls below a threshold that, we can generally accommodate these types of things, but maybe if it's, let's say attendance is expected more than 500 people, it's like, wait a second here, we need to notify police, fire, how we need to kind of. So is size part of this? Is there a definition maybe in Newtown or other communities of special event? How do they define it?
Sure.
Because I mean, I decide to invite one person to read poetry and 100 people show up. Did I just trigger something here? So I don't, how do we have, whether a size threshold, below 100, you don't have to apply, but I think Adam's point about, it could 10 school graduation outdoors be the special event under whatever definition. Maybe we wouldn't want to do that. So maybe we can see if there's definitions or something from other places.
I think that's reasonable.
This part of the world is known for benefits, annual benefits held in outdoor places, like library did at Marvelwood School. The Land Trust will do in somebody's backyard. This has been going on forever and forever, and nobody's ever gotten a special permit for those things.
Yeah, I think somebody's backyard is different. So I was trying to make that distinction between, like what Adam was saying, this private person hosting the land trust or the library at their house, which has been done, right? Is that different than the library hosting an event in the parking lot next to their, it's in the parking lot in front of the old fire department? That's those all things that's I hadn't considered before this conversation, but it seems that, as Glenn says, that it makes sense that we define what a special permit is, with size thresholds, and who, where it becomes where it's a special event and where it's not a special event.
So Newtown kind of outlines a special event as a fair, a circus, a carnival, similar type of entertainment. So it's, like in the case of the concert series, it's not defined as a picnic or a gathering. It's more of something that would be somewhat intrusive, loud. So those are the examples that they give when they're looking for somebody to fill out such a permit for a nonprofit.
Well, I like that, only that because I don't know that I don't feel good about telling a school like Marvelwood that they have to get a permit so that they can host the library event or any of the other, because there's so many different special events that we don't know about, at any one of these different schools and entities, and beginning to make them, starting them one more thing, another hoop for them to jump through. So when we have, but I see where with what Ty just said, the way Newtown was doing it with those kind of events, that those are special events that are more imposing and maybe should get a permit.
So by that definition, then neither the concerts, how many people go to those concerts? It's 100 if it's,
No way.
yeah, it's 50. It's
Yeah.
not a lot. So if the threshold is 500 people, I mean, that's half the town.
Oh, I
Right.
wasn't talking about the number of people but when when she listed off the type of event, so the concert series seems to me like something that would fall into that.
Right,
Oh, okay, okay.
it's just more entertainment related and not specific to what's happening at the land trust, but if somebody else was to want to do a concert series on their farm, I mean, that's very popular now. And if somebody wanted to start doing something like that, maybe they should come to the commission to make sure that they could have a permit to have such concert series.
Yeah, I don't think anybody should be allowed to do that, to be honest.
Right, so by way of like the land trust doing it, although it's very minor and not terribly intrusive and it's a great community event, it almost opens the door to like a large farm maybe saying, hey, well, they're doing it, why can't we do it? And then you at least have some control over the matter.
You know, what would be interesting would be to see what the town of Morris does about the South Farms, because that is a huge hit.
And it's been a big deal too. I
Yeah.
agree with you. It's been a big hit, but there are a lot of neighbors who have been really upset with that
Oh, yeah?
because it's been very loud.
I think it's been limited in the days and hours in which it could happen.
I actually think that, I think that it became more limited.
Right.
There were, when they first started it, there were some real issues and the town relooked at it and they put restrictions like Guy said.
We should look at the regulation they wrote and see what we think. Cause I don't know, I've been there and it was a lot of fun.
So we're at a couple of hours in now, and I think we've got some homework to do on this. And Ty, could I ask you to do some research on the regulations in surrounding towns and see how they
Of course.
the special events, and then maybe come up with a definition, and then maybe expand what we've got here as in the nonprofit related temporary uses, and then and see where we go. We can talk about it when we get together at our next what is it, third Thursday meeting.
Yeah, so January 19th is our next scheduled meeting date.
And Glenn's got some homework to do with regard to 3A, B, and C. And so it sounds like we're at a good spot, unless somebody else has anything else to say. Sounds like we're at a good spot to stop.
I think we definitely are in a good spot to stop. Can't talk. But in the handout, there was a page called possible additional items. One
Yes.
was wedding venues. Is this what we've been discussing? I mean,
think when
this
put
whole
that-
thing about the land trust and the picnic and the farmer's market, I'm not sure I understand how that got into our agenda tonight anyway, unless it was under this possible additional items.
No, I think what I intended to do as part of that, Alice, was to really sort of share information with you guys that as we're working through these issues, if these other issues pop up, there were some recommendations in the POCD, for example, et cetera. And
Right.
the commission might say as part of our work, well, hang on a sec, can we address this or include that? While I'm here, while I'm working with you, the addition of, maybe an additional item or two, I don't think I'm gonna get too concerned about. I don't think everything on that list is possible with the budget that we have right now today. But I think just if these are things on your radar screens that are important to you, please make sure that you mention them as part of our work and we'll see what we can do.
Great. And as an aside, Alice, I think that we just opened up the avenue at our last meeting for those weddings as events to be considered
Right.
occupation. So I think
Right.
that's a way to skin that cat. as opposed to this special events, it can be a major home occupation, and then people can come to us and say they're gonna have 12 a year, and they're gonna be, you know, this is where we're gonna park, and this is the hours of operation, and we're gonna deliberate that as a special permit.
Well, you know, this business we're in is amazing because somebody who, we're talking about somebody having concerts on their land. Maybe that's a home occupation. They charge, they
Only
charge.
Only if you're the
tickets.
Jackson Five, the Osmonds, or. Gotta be
just
all
think,
be
you know,
related.
I have a big field out here. My home occupation is having concerts.
Maybe Club Getaway wouldn't have had an issue
Right.
had their concert been the Rolling Stones,
There you go. Now we're talking.
whatever that was that they were playing, which
Oh,
was
God.
weird. Boys.
Oh, jeez.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming.
Thank
Glenn,
you,
thanks
Matt.
for shepherding us through.
Thank
and
you, Glenn.
Ty,
You're
thanks
very
for
welcome.
putting us
Happy
back in.
holidays, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Matt. Thank
Ty.
you, everybody. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah.
Bye.
Happy holidays.
Do we have to adjourn?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Move to adjourn.
Yeah, move.
Second.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Call Alice.